Picture a 1-ton steel anvil plummeting from the sky, instantly flattening an unsuspecting victim into the shape of a thin accordion. It is a shockingly violent premise. Yet this exact brand of wordless, hyper-aggressive physical comedy earned its creators 7 Oscars. Psychologists have found that watching these exaggerated bludgeonings helps young viewers navigate real-world morality. Because the damage is temporary, children learn to process the consequences of bad behavior, often displaying genuine empathy when a character faces actual danger. The fact that these shorts have remained universally effective for over 80 years suggests they aren't just random sequences of chaos, but are built on a highly specific understanding of how to trigger a human response. Today, creators are attempting to bypass that understanding using automation. They are feeding text prompts into AI engines to instantly generate their own animated shorts. In minutes, a single user can produce dozens of clips featuring the familiar feline chasing a rodent across a mid-century living room floor. The algorithms can copy the bright colors, the retro furniture, and the character outlines, but nobody is laughing. When you watch these generated clips, the movements feel hollow. The pacing is entirely predictable, and the characters move with a mechanical drift that the human eye immediately recognizes as lifeless. True slapstick relies on a mathematical science of human cognition and physical momentum. It is an invisible architecture that machines currently cannot compute. The structure of a successful physical gag lies in how the brain processes stress. To trigger that release, a writer forces 2 entirely different frames of reference to collide without warning. The vehicle is often the rule of 3. You establish a pattern by showing an action twice, and on the 3rd attempt, you shatter expectations. This works best when the punchline is implicit. The writer provides the setup, but stops just before the final result. If the joke simply hands you the answer, the tension fizzles. The laugh only erupts when the viewer's brain is forced to independently supply the missing piece of the puzzle. A successful gag exploits human cognitive gaps. It requires deep psychological intuition about how an audience thinks, rather than a programmatic generation of events. Once the gag is set on paper, it is translated into physical motion through 2 core principles: timing and spacing. By packing a dense cluster of frames together, animators create an agonizingly slow, deliberate buildup of potential energy. Then, by suddenly placing the next few frames far apart, that stored energy violently snaps into maximum velocity. The most critical tool is the pause. Animators will hold a character entirely still for a fraction of a second right before the impact, stretching the audience's anticipation. AI generators process movement strictly linearly. They strive for smooth, physically accurate motion, which destroys the comedic timing. Hilarious movement demands the suspension of gravity and momentum. Comedic pacing is an intentional distortion of reality, calculated frame by frame. Because the characters rarely speak, the entire narrative burden falls on the audio track. Physical comedy is punctuated by highly exaggerated Foley work. The quick whistle zip-outs, the bouncing ricochets, and the screams provide the auditory feedback that makes the visual violence land. Underneath those effects, complex jazz and classical scores drive the story forward, setting a pace that dialogue usually provides. In the short The Cat Concerto, the music isn't just an accompaniment. Franz Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody acts as the literal engine for every visual gag in the film. The audio track dictates the physical reality of the scene. The timing of the animation is locked to the logic of the score. The writing, the pacing, and the sound must operate in absolute mathematical unison to land a single joke. Master animators often timed their drawings directly to the physical beat of a metronome. They established a strict musical rhythm, only to break it at the exact millisecond required to trigger the psychological release of laughter. An algorithm can paint the aesthetic surface of a cat and mouse rivalry, but it lacks the human intuition required to measure the delivery of a joke. Generating an image is a matter of code, but making an audience laugh without a spoken word remains one of the most complex, handcrafted art forms ever devised.